The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Ben Ark from LN Bits.
Shemai, hello, everybody.
Michael Carter from Bits Be Trippin'.
Let's get into this, guys.
Dan Eve, the Crypto Raptor.
Good evening from the United Kingdom.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to issue one. Issue one, analysis, limited capacity, logistics to slow Chinese Bitcoin miners' global shift. China is continuing to move Bitcoin miners out of China, but it's taking longer than you might think, unplugging all those computers and moving them somewhere else to plug them in. Also, China continues to crack down on Bitcoin, taking down a company that was suspected of providing software services for virtual currency transactions. For years, China has signaled that it wants to ban Bitcoin. They could be looking to stem capital outflows via stablecoins and cryptocurrencies next, or it could be all part of their 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party. Be sure to give us a thumbs up down below if you're just starting to watch the show. Ben Ark, what's going on in China? Why is it taking so long to move the miners?
It's a lot of weight. Those things weigh a lot. You have to put them on boats. You have to ship them around the world. Like, they're not easy to move. And I imagine that those Bitcoin miners are dumping Bitcoin right now, trying to get their miners moved into, more friendly locations where they can start mining again. It's interesting that China are doing this, but I mean, they're not just banning it; they're banning it and copying it, aren't they? Which is the point. Like, they want to make their own digital currency, and that they're not happy that Bitcoin would compete with their own digital currency, which they're making. It will be interested if it continues to kind of like affect the Bitcoin ecosystem in China. So if they start attacking the manufacturers like Bitmain, I imagine they will, because for China they don't care. This is it's not even a record. It's a tiny part of their GDP, and if they want to ban something, they'll ban it, and that's fine. That mining will just move somewhere else, and the mining in China, as we said in other shows, it wasn't really sustainable, and it hasn't really been exploring the energy sources effectively. It's been using cheap coal energy, which is being subsidized by Chinese government. So it's not a bad thing that it's moving, but yeah, it's going to take a little bit of time. That's to be expected. It'll just be interesting now where these miners start popping up, where they're going to start mining Bitcoin, where they're going to set up shop. I know a lot of them are moving over to the US, and maybe with some of the the promises of free and clean energy, but volcano energy in somewhere like El Salvador. Maybe a fuel pop up there, maybe a fuel pop up in Iceland, and make use of all that geothermal limitless power which is there and running all the time. So yeah, hash rate will go up, but for now we're going to have a dip while these miners are relocating. And I think that China's just going to keep on attacking Bitcoin till it's out of their country, so they don't have any competition, and they can monopolize their digital currency and people using their digital currency.
They can go anywhere they want as long as it's not my house. I want to watch movies and read books in peace. Carter from Bits Be Trippin', your thoughts on China?
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, they've been trying to break it for a while. And this was kind of a place that they could actually have a physical impact. They can show up to the various areas where it was being mined. They could see it on the grid as it started to scale up now to where it wasn't just a small power user. So now they had an idea of where these were at, and then put out that ultimatum to shut down or be seized type of thing. And I think what we've seen so far is some of the faster moving, more organized shops out there in China have either liquidated some of their equipment, or they've tried to find some, partnership that was just out of China. And that's the stuff that we've seen move. When we look at where the Bitcoin hash rate has recovered so far, stuff is sitting in ports still. Some of it is getting deployed, but we still have a bit, I think, before we see it a full recovery. But I think the point is it will fully recover in some way. And if it isn't that, it's going to be in the next series of equipment that starts to come out. To Ben's point, I think on what's the next sector that could be hit. It could be something like a Bitmain, one of the companies that are actually producing it. I've been looking to see if there's going to become a moratorium out there. Anybody that's doing any kind of pre-ordering of equipment, especially first batch stuff on some of the newer stuff, I would just take caution on it, that you are in a very agile, loose environment right now when it comes to regulatory in those countries that are probably most impacted from it. So investor capital and that sort of thing, I think, has a higher risk. I think a lot of the big companies that are buying that hardware either have some kind of understanding, or if it's at a port level understanding, or using a broker that understands the current regulatory environment there to keep them out of some of that risk. But America's, there's several countries in the EU right now that are like, hey, we're open for business, send them here. You can see, luckily in the States, it's 50 states. And even if the federal government comes out and puts some kind of restriction or I would say impediment, the states can follow it, or they don't need to follow it, right? We've seen this with like mask mandates and stuff like that, where states ultimately will come back and say, hey, we have created legislation here. We've created, kind of grandfathered rules here. And you're going to see places like Texas and Washington continue to operate in some of these other states that see that competitive advantage that these states are getting from revenue stream and new jobs and that sort of thing, encourage more Bitcoin mining coming there. So outlook is still good. Nothing's shaken Bitcoin. I mean, contrary to some of the risk out there, I think if you do business in China, that's part of your risk right now. And it's always been part of your risk, right? I mean, it's a communist regime. At any point in time, we all knew that this could happen. It's just now finally happening. And the Bitcoin network signal to noise is showing us it's happening, because the network dropped close to 50% of its hash rate, 28% network adjusted difficulty, because it takes time for difficulty to adjust. But the numbers after the last adjustment here that just happened a few days ago was about 28.5% on the network adjustment side, which just means folks that are mining here are making close to 30% more yield, even in a down market right now. So it's unfortunate China's not seeing that. I mean, I feel bad because it's at a human level. People, they're trying to be part of this network and part of that environment. And anytime somebody comes and tells you you can't do that when you were doing it and you were an innovator and a leader, I mean, they had 60% of the hash rate. It sucks for them, but this is what it is. That's China. China's going to do what China wants to do.
It's amazing being in Bitcoin this long. You have all these kind of potential black swans where you say, okay, Mt. Gox is going to go down, BTC-E is going to go down, all these other services look really risky. And you say, wow, everyone's mining in China. How long is that going to go on? How long is this government that doesn't seem to like anything related to freedom or independence going to allow this free and independent coin to be mined in their country? And it's interesting to see this finally happen, but it's also, if you put on a list things that you think are going to happen in Bitcoin, like a country taking it or a country banning it. We've been talking about this for years. Another interesting idea, although I think it's a long one, a bit of a stretch. There's a lot of these new Bitcoin miners where they put them right into the container already. If only we could then plug those containers in on the container ships, get some kind of satellite internet. It gets a little far-fetched, but then we could mine at sea and they could never stop us from mining Bitcoin. So I'm sure technically it's a difficult sell, but if it's already in the container and you just need to plug it in, I think we could get it done. Dan, I heard some of those trucks backing up at your house. Carter, do you want to weigh in on my container ship mining first?
Oh, I was laughing. I said your power is probably going to be your biggest issue there. But yeah, I mean, it's not completely far-fetched. There's an entire concept of what they call off the grid mining, right? Where you're not grid tied in, right? And there's various reasons why you'd want to do that. And part of it is especially around if there's not legislative issues, but just the local area you're in are concerned that you're going to pull too much or you're going to be putting the resources at max. Not being tied into that system helps keep alleviating those kind of risk. But, having where you're competing and sending up to, Bitcoin, Blockstream, satellite, your only issue there is like you're you're starting the race condition with one hand behind your back because of the latency issue. And, when you find a block and you broadcast it, you want that to be hitting every node possible to make sure that you're not racing against somebody else and your work is orphaned. But, over time, maybe that's one for, ironically, we use Elon's Starlink for that, where we have faster latency at sea. Who knows? It's possible.
It's an interesting idea. They, mining on the container ships, but it's also gosh, what was I gonna say? It just messaged me. Go ahead, Dan, you confused me. I saw
senior moment, they're creeping in.
I got like 4 different points. Dan, I see the truck at your house. Go ahead.
Sorry, that was my bad. I was sat on the wrong YouTube stream, and I was thinking, yeah, it's static. The show hasn't started yet. I think it's a very good point about the portability of mining units in general, and as collections of mining units. That it wouldn't surprise me if with the looming decision, because I'm sure there was a reasonable amount of rumor beforehand, and if you're in the know, you may have had enough time to prep up and actually start to put into containers and try and make that transition as efficient as possible from one country to another, even finding sellers that could early on. But it's just unfortunate, isn't it? Because it is people's livelihoods that, there's obviously people have invested. It's not just companies, big, rich, multinational companies that are mining Bitcoin. There are small startups that started mining. The good thing is that obviously, if the 70% of Bitcoin mining was done in China, and that's going to be good for centralization that has been banned. And there's already been offers of saying, come and mine at the volcano in El Salvador, and hopefully more taking advantage of other renewables in say Iceland, as we said. But I think that the impact has probably been a bit muted because the chip development's been slower, right? So the miners have actually, the units have been lasting a bit longer. What would have really ruffled feathers is if like a brand new set of chips came out and huge power surge in terms of hash rate, but it's currently sitting at about 96 exahashes, down from like an all-time high of like 175. But it seems to be, at the end of the day, it's very secure. It's more secure than it needs to be. And if you actually look at the hash rate, we're still at the level that we were sort of to around the beginning of 2020. And the network is it's very secure. I mean, obviously, we'd like to see a massive mega pump in hash rate and more renewables to get that level up to 50%, so that Elon Musk rides his like Tesla stallion back again into the Bitcoin world. But yeah, I think we'll have to wait and see the sort of the long-term impact of this. But I can imagine that hash rate is going to be jumping up pretty soon as the ship's mining units go back online and start to be switched on again, dusted off.
I wouldn't hold your breath waiting for Elon to come back, but I do have notes. My notes say that Bitcoin mining is a bit like choosing a cabin. You have your perfect location out on the hydroelectric river. You're all set, but then you need a network cable. And then you might need a little electricity too. And then it's not a cabin. Then you're living in the suburbs. It's interesting, the kind of trade-offs where you want to be remote, you want to be near hydro. Maybe you even want to be in a strange remote country where they don't care very much about Bitcoin mining, but then you need a network cable. So it's all these different trade-offs. And it's interesting to see China declining, maybe the US, Iceland, other countries ascending here. What do you think, Carter? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, so it's the container ship kind of concept, or the containers themselves, was really for portability, but it also was a very innovative way to contain your hot and cold zones when you're building out like a mining rig setup like that, to where you could have your intake and your exhaust in a confined area, and you could control the environment a lot better. Then you also had the portability of it, and a lot of the container style farms don't even actually use like network connections. You don't need to centralize your networking there. They'll have their own LTE tower, right? So it's also cell networks, and it's very interesting that they work very well on cell networks, because you can put them in countries that don't necessarily have a huge infrastructure, but you could have localized power, and then you're just hitting the local cell network there, so when you start talking like, Africa and areas that have pretty diverse cell network set up, because they kind of jumped over the concept of needing personal computers, went straight to doing things with cell phones and mobile apps and the optimized LTE networks out there. It gives you a lot more portability. Additionally, you're going to see, to the point of, why the innovation track hasn't really slowed down. I mean, Bitcoin went from, like the Avalon A1s, Butterfly Labs era, to where it was using, 15, 16 nanometer architecture, to now being the tip of the spear, right? Where it is leading the innovation and pushing these foundries to, 3 nanometer and lower, right? So they're at the tip of the spear now, driving innovation. So as new breakthroughs are made there, it's Bitcoin, because you have the proverbial arms race to have the most efficient setup there. So as new foundries are spun up in the US, when we have Samsung coming here, I think was it TSMC's coming with a new foundry here. You're going to have a few new foundries in the next couple of years, also stateside, to kind of lighten some of that global pressure too. So it's going to be interesting to see, where's the next? Is there another new Bitmain? Does Bitmain get kicked out of or leave China and start innovating in Taiwan or somewhere else that's next to a foundry? Has a little different structure.
Just a question. Do you think that who was it in the chat just said something which I was sort of thinking the same thing, Crypto Player, that the in the chat he just said that the Chinese miners, they're not going to move, they're just going to sort of go underground. They're going to update, go underground. Is that possible? And you say the people utilizing these cell towers, is it, because I know you obviously got the great Chinese firewall, is it possible to mine Bitcoin? Because obviously a lot of their power grid, they haven't got power grid. It's like localized. So I know they've had problems in the past with people kind of mining under the radar. So do you think that that will happen, that they'll just kind of go underground and make use of these LTC towers?
Well, it'd be hard to go underground at a large scale, because you're just going to put a footprint out there, and at a worst case, you put a heat footprint out there, even if you're not connected. And a lot of countries, at least like the larger countries like US, Russia, China, watch themselves in a whole bunch of different ways, and including thermal footprints for different setups and stuff. And so like if somebody was trying to off grid with scale, you would start to see where that heat production was. There's also a lot of, it's like when I talk like the OFAC blocks and things that have to do with regulation of like Bitcoin and stuff, and I start looking at it like it's like regulating like the phone network between people having a conversation on a phone line. That's not where you try to put that pressure at. There's already a massive infrastructure of legislation and structure around like asset management. So like even if you had somebody that was kind of going underground, they'd still have to requisition certain things, very expensive things, like if they're doing gas turbine, or they found some kind of vent in Inner Mongolian area in China and was like, we're going to be kind of tactical where we're setting up. We've paid off all the officials locally. Nobody's going to know we're here. You would still have a lot of large asset purchases that are going to have a trail,
supply chain trail. Yeah.
For sure. And then like somebody's going to ask a question, and then they're going to track it down on one of those components. And that's the same way if I'm talking to, somebody at Georgetown, or if I go to DC and talk to a legislature or any of those folks, that's part of the thing, is like when it comes down to, the innovation and the tech stack, you should innovate, put innovation funds out there to be a participant, not so much put a heavy amount of regulation on the actual operation of like the way crypto works, proof of work and all that. Because you already have this massive infrastructure in place that anything we purchase over $10,000, I don't care what country, and you can go to Malta with less, rules. But if you go out to Malta and drop, a couple $1 million on a yacht, you're going to have a huge paper trail, right? So that is everywhere on this planet, and that's for all kinds of reasons. And it's not just because the U.S. are bad and SEC wants to shut everything down. It's literally because every country has that interest that if somebody's buying things of large value, they want to know about it because it's a large asset in their country. So they could go off grid with some of it. It would, I think in China, you're never going to drum any of it out. And it's the same thing if everybody in the entire world went cray and started trying to shut down the decentralized system. You would just have this. You would have people moving back to this, single rigs being sold on black market, things would be running on at a home scale, and you would still have a pretty diverse network across the entire world, right? And I think that's the kind of point, is that it would still go underground. It might not be at the scale that it is, and it would lose a large, the big investors and all that stuff, but you'd still have this decentralized network. You know, from a China standpoint, maybe they get a handle on it. One of the speculative pieces that I've been talking to Witt and some of the guys from Compass is trying to understand why some of the stuff's still sitting in port. And there's some speculation out there that they put a moratorium on shipping some of it because they're trying to get their arms around what's going on here. Is it going to turn into like a state sponsored, you have like a bit license? And yes, this one province that is ESG centric, you know, where it's renewable, you guys can go build your farms here. And is that going to be what the next phase of this is? And China comes back with 30% of the Bitcoin hash rate, but now under more of a state mandated, know your customer kind of concept. Seeing that some of that hash rate hasn't, you know, came back online, and knowing that some of that stuff's sitting in port and not allowed to leave, makes you wonder, are they going to put it back under a state sponsored program and not let it leave country? Which is even more of a reason for Bitmain to kind of maybe check if they're wanting to stay in this, are they going to become, you know, kind of state owned, and now they're going to regulate how much Bitcoin miners they sell, and where's that IP go? Where do the engineers go? Do they leave there and go to other competing companies and that kind of thing?
I think that blends well into the exit question. Exit question: will yes or no, will the Chinese crackdown continue? Ben Ark.
Yes.
Carter.
I think so, for sure, including into production.
Dan Eve.
Yeah, they want to butter people up for the WAN, for the CBDC. So they're going to make Bitcoin sound as bad as possible.
It's the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party, and everyone agrees the crackdown continues. Moving on to issue 2. Issue 2, Bitcoin price consolidation may be nearing the end, indicators suggest. Omkar Godbol, writing in Coinbase, says that Bitcoin may soon move out of its 7-week trading range of 30,000 to 40,000, with a major indicator, the Bollinger Bands, tracking that the price volatility may suggest a big move is overdue. Carter, is the price of Bitcoin going up?
I think in the next 6 months, it absolutely will. I think there's a couple other existential things that aren't being tracked by a lot of these, you know, I would call them market indicator indices that people are looking at to see from the volume and use and all that. I think some of the tech stack that's coming into place right now, especially like from Fidelity on their side with trying to hit that open enrollment standpoint in November. So, you know, in the US, especially, companies kick out open enrollment, which is when you go and you declare your 401k settings and your insurance settings. If they can actually get their investment portfolio and portals set up to add in that crypto segment, and if that's through, you know, current EFTs, or that they're going to be, because they have a custodial service side too, to where they'll be a custodial on behalf of folks, then you'll have that transfer of wealth that's in current 401ks moved over to, you know, Fidelity Investments. They have everything to gain from that. I think there's enough structure in place for them to continue to do that and at least offer current offerings out there. Nothing's stopping that right now. So I can't imagine them not, you know, pursuing that. And that's in this November. So I think there's still a lot of innovation and movement on that will put some serious buying pressure on Bitcoin, and all these other things that we're tracking is kind of just noise.
Dan Eve, are you a bull and bullish?
I think I'm bullish. Screw it. Yeah, I think the price has got to go up. I'm counting on it anyway. This bull run's not over yet.
You got to lean over to the right there. You have to cover up the bear and highlight the bull in the background. Ben Ark, the price of Bitcoin, up or down?
Yeah, the TA is just nonsense at this point, and that chart is an embarrassment. It looks like it's made on Microsoft Paint. So it's funny how all these different technical analysis tools, they all claim that they're still in their channel. You know, we're still in a hyperwave, and we're still in a stock to flow, and blah blah blah. Like we're always within their channel, and they're not all accurate. And now we're certainly not all those, you know, day trader types who follow these technical analysis tools and can kind of shift the price, you know, within their ranges. That they've dropped out, man. You know, like they're dropping like flies, and now we're getting down to the hodler bedrock and fundamentals. And the fundamentals are that Bitcoin infrastructure is stronger than ever. We've had a massive upgrade. Bitcoin Core 0.21 now has Taproot integrated into it, and I've heard it runs really nicely. And we've got all these new things, you know, just within the near future, which is going to make Bitcoin much more powerful piece of software, as well as it's all this great software which is being developed by all these free and open source developers. And, you know, crazy events like, you know, a whole country now, as controversial as it may be, but it's now, you know, illegal tender in El Salvador, and there's going to be a hell of a lot of innovation and Bitcoin being used in the wild, which is then going to, you know, create a lot of innovation and products which are being built on it. And, you know, like you have got Fidelity, you've got Microsoft, you've got all these incredibly large players jumping into Bitcoin as well. So yeah, the fundamentals are outstanding. But, you know, those traders are dropping, and it's supply and demand. So I do think that we are going to hit down to, like, you know, 15K. But then we'll bounce up like crazy, and we'll be heading towards that, 240K. You know, the 240K, which we talked about in the past. So yeah, we are going to drop in the near term. So the next couple of months, it's going to be a bit of a rough road. The Bitcoin price doesn't look very strong. We just seem to be bouncing along, drop. So there's not much momentum there. But in the longer term, yeah, in the sort of 6 months and beyond, then we're definitely going to shoot up, and the bulls are going to come back just off the back of all that crazy fundamental momentum.
I do agree, Ben. It's a very different market now than what it used to be. Trying to use the old tools to predict a market that includes Michael Saylor and Elon Musk. Elon Musk was bragging about hodling not too long ago. If you have millions of dollars, it's not difficult not to sell your investment. It's the rest of us that have rent and bills that are chiseling away at our investment, becoming a smaller and smaller part of this. The large players are taking up all the space.
It's also all these people. All these people who have like huge, like, historical wealth which they built up, and they want to secure it in some way into a hard asset. And now they've all been learning about Bitcoin over this pandemic, and over some of the, you know, the inflation FUD which has been out there. So that, whether that's true or not, they're going to start diversifying their portfolios into Bitcoin, and that's going to push the price up too. But it'll take a few months to, you know, come into fruition, I think.
Speaking of Saylor, there is actually a YouTube video on now, I think, that from MicroStrategies, and it's literally titled "Why Bitcoin is going to Make You Rich" with Michael Saylor.
Baby pump, baby.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick on two. So part of the whole premise of having, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want the large, you know, Fidelities of the world or whatever in. And I made this point on one of my previous, I wouldn't even call it a podcast. It was just an open live stream. But the importance of having access for people that are not the day-to-day crypto folks like us. We get kind of tunnel vision right now because we're in the space. But I mean, I have a pretty large, my microphone's falling apart here. So I was kind of working on that too, as I'm trying to make this point. There's a lot of folks out there that want to be part of this space that don't understand enough fundamentals, nor are going to take the time to understand the, you know, not your keys, not your coins. So they're going to rely on, you know, some of these institutions to help them take part of that investment. And if that's using a strategy of like a 3 to 5 year type of thing, where they're taking 2 to 5% of their portfolio and just bringing it in there, the tools and mechanisms that enable that are getting set up and in place, right? So I don't think it's not about a question of if, it's a matter of when those things are ready. moves like from the OCC given guidance for banks to become charters. And while it was paused with the new administration change, that's still a lot of momentum that's moving towards some discovery. It's not shutting it down. It's just saying, hey, we want to make sure FINRA and all these other entities are aligned. So again, positive momentum from a legislative side and from just a governance side that enables, the common mom and pops that are not going to, have hardware wallets and stuff, but want to take a, 3 to 5% portfolio adjustment into it. And when you start looking at the math on that, this is where you get the JP if it's JP Morgan or if it's with some of these other analysts that are working for them, they're looking at, assets, allocations, private equity, funds, and they're saying, if even a percentage of these folks had an enabling tool to take a position in crypto, right, wrong, or indifferent, they just wanted diversification on their portfolio, and the tools are there, and they have the timing, which is usually during like an open enrollment when you're messing with your insurance and your 401k settings, that even a 3 to 5% allocation or even a 1% allocation, when you look at all the money that's sitting in those, that's like not, money that you're getting that day. That's money that's in your account and you're just transferring that wealth. What's the winners and losers on that transfer? They're coming out of the 2040 fund that has a market basket and they're coming into crypto, and seeing that, the Kevin O'Leary and some of the larger CNBC personalities saying, hey, I'm taking a risk of 3%, and a 3% allocation is a good risk for us. And the upside potential is high because it's a pure supply demand game on some of these things. They're taking risk in that. And as that narrative starts to inflow to folks that have now the tool to walk in and just do I don't know anything about crypto, but I can sure hit this 3% and next finish, right? And then it moves that allocation there. When that enablement comes in place, that's going to be the proverbial, I think Novogratz said it a long time ago, the herd is coming. I think that's when you actually see the reciprocation of that. And those things are being built. And it's like, I look at all these fundamentals and these charts and stuff, and I'm like, guys, like the tools are being built to do this. And then when that happens, you're going to see a pretty large, effort and a signal to noise on that, like, hey, you can do this, you should have 3 to 5%, from a risk standpoint. And that just, you start looking at the money on that and the supply, it's numbers only go up on that standpoint.
Michael Saylor's one was there's an ocean of liquidity out there which is going to flood into this pond of Bitcoin, isn't there? And no, there's some great custodial solutions out there now for people who don't want to hold their own. I know it's frowned upon within our world, but there's some great custodial solutions out there. Multi-sig support is becoming ever more better. So and then when all that liquidity comes into it, and when you have big players with these huge bags like the Michael Saylors, and they have that vested interest in the Bitcoin as an ecosystem, and then all that investment capital then floods into all these projects, and that again, strengthens the project and the value proposition of Bitcoin. So no, more and more people definitely will be diversifying into Bitcoin. More and more big players will be diversifying into Bitcoin.
Well, and I just want to say again what a complete reversal this is. How just a few years ago we were rat poison. You were going to lose all your money. It was a Ponzi scheme. It was a con artists. It was all a techno babble. Like it was designed to confuse you. All the things the Bitcoiners were saying were wrong. And now, like Michael said, they're praising us on CNBC. They're investing in Bitcoin. And if they only put a small percentage in, just like we've always talked about, getting a small percentage of the gold market, or maybe getting all of it, it will change everything. And like we're saying here, in a way that the markets won't predict. It won't go up on a 9 and then, this investment fund buys 1%. It's going to go a lot more than a 9. It's going to break the little charts, and it's probably going to happen soon. But we're
all the way to 11.
All the way to 11. D minor is the saddest note there's ever been. But you guys do have to compete. I found it. It was in a box. I had to go look for it. But you now have to answer the question, will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? Let's go to Dan Eve, Crypto Raptor.
I'm going to be optimistic and I'm going to say higher.
Then ARK, higher or lower?
We said lower last week and the week before, I think, and we were right. So I think it's going to go lower. But hold on tight, because hold on, and then within a year you'll be back up. Don't worry.
Ben the Bear, and now Carter, higher or lower?
I think I'd be higher. I'll take the opposite of that.
And here we are against the ball. Will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? It's a very scientific process.
It's probably more scientific than we realize.
Most likely the price will be higher. Ben may be wrecked. Check out the WCN Clips channel on YouTube. We now have 50 subscribers. Join us at WCN Clips on YouTube for exciting clips like UK rules in favor of fake Satoshi, Jack Mallers strike combats Coinbase, and US urges El Salvador to be responsible. These clips and more at WCN Clips on YouTube. Moving on to issue 3. Crypto scams. According to the Motley Fool, scams related to cryptocurrency and investing are more common and making more money than ever before. 2020 was a record year for investment and cryptocurrency scams. Almost 26,500 cases were reported to the government, resulting in a loss of $419 million. And 2021 is on pace to exceed those numbers. It must all be Bitcoin's fault. Dan, Eve, why are there so many scams in Bitcoins and altcoins and ICOs and brand new cryptocurrencies? Is it Bitcoin's fault?
It's always Bitcoin's fault to a no coiner. But I think one thing that they don't do when they make these when they put these numbers down is compare to say how many or like at least the estimate of how much utilization is going up, how many more people are using it, how much more, because the amount of infrastructure in 2021 compared to 2020 and the amount of services, the amount of things that you could use your Bitcoin for there's a lot more. So you're probably going to have, if you have more of something floating around, you're going to have more of the crime that goes along with it, especially if it's a new technology. I read one earlier about a guy in Malta who this is an investment scam, but he handed his phone to make someone to make a transaction. It was meant to be a small transaction, and he was like gobsmacked when the person just swiped 700k and was just like, yeah, screw you. So unfortunately, you've definitely got to watch out for that. If you've got a load of crypto that you're just, Bitcoin stored on your phone or whatever, don't let someone else have your phone. But even NatWest now, I've seen an advert, or not an advert.
Oh, we seem to have lost Dan. I know back
so
in
they're kind of,
there he is. Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, sorry, carry on.
Oh, well, I know back in the day, they used to hand out a ledger at the San Francisco Bitcoin meetup, and they would braggingly say there's $1 million on this hardware wallet, and they'd pass it around the room. And nowadays, I imagine someone palm it and sleight of hand and then break it down physically and get inside there, because everyone knows you don't let anyone take your hardware wallet out of the room if you want to keep your money. Let's go to.
Sorry. I was also going to say about that. Not just 2021 has been a year of, and 2020, has been a year of the scams increasing as they do naturally with usage and adoption. But if you think about again, comparing it to other scams and other fraud, and say we've been in lockdown, like the number of delivery scams and tax scams, they're just every 5 minutes. So I'd like to see the numbers on that, and you'd probably find that the amount of delivery scams has risen way more exponentially compared to actual Bitcoin scams, and that's purely because of the scenario, the environment we're in now, where everyone's using deliveries more, therefore everyone's going to get scammed more on deliveries.
If you stare at QVC long enough, you'll eventually buy some cubic zirconium jewelry. But I've been buying mainly stuff on Amazon, but that's my own fault. Let's go to Ben Ark. Your thoughts on crypto scams?
They're out there. People have to adjust to being digitally native, where there isn't all these protections that you had, societally in the past. You're now in the Wild West, and it's a lot easier to get scammed. It's sad because the people who really suffer, and when there's these sort of waves of scams coming through, are, well, they're the people you don't want to suffer, aren't they? They're the ill-informed, usually the people who can't afford to lose their money they're losing, and that sucks. But yeah, I mean, it's a very arbitrary number, so I have no idea how these numbers are calculated, because one person's scam is another person's gold mine, isn't it? They manage to pump their bags and sell it to somebody else. But I suppose if they're talking about sort of direct invest in this, cryptocurrency thing, or this is the next big cryptocurrency, send me your money, or send me your Bitcoin keys and I'll send you blah blah blah, then yeah, it's very sad. And it's just we just have to do more of a job to educate people on being very skeptical about anything, which offers, free and easy money. And then very sadly, in this world of Bitcoin and some of these, altcoins, that has been, some people have achieved that. They've invested a very small amount of money and then they've achieved huge wealth. So they can use that as a historical reference and say, well, if you invest in this thing, then you could also achieve this huge wealth. And then desperate people invest in it and they lose their money. So it's very sad, but we just need to do more of a job as people who've been around for a while, to just try and educate people as much as possible of these scams. And then ultimately people are just going to have to learn, like, this is the responsibility of being digitally native. Like, you need to just treat everything with a little bit of skepticism. And that doesn't just apply to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, whatever, and all these crypto scams. It also applies to just differentiating between good and bad data, which a lot of people are struggling with, and that's why we see this rise of conspiracy theories and so on. But people will get better. It's just we've suddenly got this new data point where we can get a lot of information, and we just need to be able to differentiate between the bullshit and the good stuff. Human brains are very capable of doing this, but it will just take a little bit of time for people to learn how to exist in this new digital environment.
It is interesting to have this kind of compromised position, like Ben was saying, where you're like, all the new crazy scammy stuff is a scam, but the Bitcoin is okay. And all the new scammy stuff makes you lots of money. And the Bitcoin also makes you lots of money, but the Bitcoin's okay and the scammy stuff's not, even though lots of people made money on the scammy stuff, but lots of other people lost money. So it's like a very tough position to be in. Yeah.
It's like when someone asks you about Bitcoin, then you try and explain Bitcoin, and then in the back of your head, you're thinking, I just sound like someone selling a Ponzi. I just sound like someone scamming, just scamming somebody. And you have to stop yourself. It just sounds like you're pitching some sort of scam. When you say to them, look, buy, 10 grand's worth of Bitcoin and then hold it for 5 years, you'll probably be able to retire off that. I mean, that's a very scammy thing to say to somebody, but within Bitcoins, it's been true. And the technology's there, and the infrastructure and all the geniuses behind it are there. But it makes it so easy for these other, well, not projects, for other, what would you call them? Just these vultures to fly in and just to take advantage of that and try and hoodwink people into giving them money.
I also want to forgive everyone, because it seems like it would be real easy to convince your family and friends to get into Bitcoin, especially if you have knowledge about it. You've read a bunch of books about it, you're really into Bitcoin. You're like, got to get in. But like Ben says, invest 10K and retire sounds really scammy. And if you scroll back through my messages, I probably said that to my whole family and no one listened to me. So it's interesting to see how even with the best of intentions and the best of knowledge, you still sound like a dirty scammer. Let's go to Carter from Bitsby Tripping. Your thoughts on crypto scams? Is it inherent? Is it part of new technology? Or is it, like Ben said, the people just want to get rich quick?
Yeah, I mean, I think good money is always going to bring bad malicious actors. I think anything in general brings malicious actors and people trying to, get one thing over somebody else. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a MMO and somebody trying to steal your hard-earned, WoW gold to crypto, right? It's the same kind of basic concept where somebody's trying to take from you. I think a lot of it comes down to education. The unfortunate thing with crypto is it's complicated enough that people will spend a certain amount of time on it, and they take chances on the wisdom of the crowd type of thing, and that's why we see stuff like Safe Moon and some of these other obvious rug pull. The Shiba crowd, people think critical mass will then run it up and then somebody's going to be left with the bag, right? And you have these natural order effects occurring that are just kind of replicants of our society and the way we tribe together certain things. But trying to understand the fundamentals of a project and what gives it some value proposition. Quite frankly, a lot of people don't. There was a point in time where I think people cared about it. It seems now that it's all about, because you have this like critical mass that puts a little bit of time into crypto, they gravitate. I mean, just look at the community sizes on like the Sheeb folks, and Dogecoin has a check mark and Bitcoin doesn't, right? I mean, like, I still don't understand why Jack hasn't given Bitcoin a verified account, but like, I think it comes down ultimately down into education across from everybody to understand, like, here's the things and here's what they're trying to do. And here's the risk you enter in this. It's like doing business, like we were talking about earlier with China. Like if you're hosting in China or you paid some kind of colo, I've heard a lot of people that had some kind of colo deal with China and now it's shut down and they're not going to get their money back. It was kind of what you entered in. And so it's kind of like a disclaimer coming out with some of the folks with some of these obvious, there's obvious scams, and then there's ones that look like they have at least a community behind them, but there's no real point to them. Of just educating what's the difference there and where do you ultimately want to, have your money setting in. And, there's a lot of friends I know that like, they've been around me, they've seen the mining that, I mean, and mind you, I was doing this stuff. I was talking on Bitcoin Talk in 2011, late 2010s when I created my account there. And like, they've been around it since the beginning practically. And some of them took a position, some of them were out in 2017. But I still get the same actors, the same friends that have been around me of all people, like that do this every day. And they're still like, hey man, what do you think about Safe Moon? I'm like, bro, like seriously, like, have you not been listening for 7 years? What I'm trying to tell you here. But what it comes down to is like, people go to chase the quickest dollar. I don't know if we're ever going to change people from that. It's just more enablement from some of these services and people building, like Lightning and some of these other ancillary tools that get them to, make Bitcoin sexy, make it easier to use and access, and give it a value proposition that, pushes people to stay to some of those projects. But it makes it hard when you have stuff like Ethereum with airdrops, Uniswap doing airdrops, like this free money. Like I have an account, I get money that happens to be worth money. Getting, these exclusive groups that try to get, pump and dump and all the, it's just, there's so many scams out there and so many ways for people to take your money from it. And it's that kind of quick order effect, like, the generations that are really interacting with this. When you look at like the demographics, it's like, it's our generation and younger that have had that click loot kind of mindset from gaming and stuff. And I want the quick instant gratification. It really preys on that, and that kind of ideology that maybe I'm taking this huge risk, but if I can get, a 10x Robin Hood kind of style event, it's just going to continue to occur. But I don't think you break that in any way besides better tooling, education, better interfaces, and just, and us having conversations like this, and hopefully people find it and it's interesting to them. And sometimes they find it after the fact, right? They're like, man, I got rugged, and this will be the metadata inside this video. And they'll be like, us talking about it, man, I wish we could reach these people. And they're like, yeah, I got rugged. Now I understand, and sometimes you got to get burned to start to have a more appreciation to understanding, and hopefully just don't get burned too hard. That's what it comes down to.
Although I do agree with you, I do think we need to make Bitcoin sexy. I'm reminded of the old joke about the stand-up comedian where he does all this work and he becomes a perfect stand-up. And like Bitcoin does all this work, becomes independent, cypherpunk, crypto, money, all this stuff. And they're like, yeah, but can you act? Moving on. We still got a chance. You guys can push the thumbs up button. We got about 47 people watching us live. Even if you're watching later, you can push the thumbs up button. That's how YouTube can tell good videos from bad ones. So just thumbs up all the good videos. Moving on to the exit question. This is a tough one. We're going to Dan first. Is it the responsibility of Bitcoiners to protect and warn people about these scams?
Well, I don't think it's their responsibility, but the good thing is about the Bitcoin community is that it's a community where people look out for each other, and although everyone rips on some of the funny like Shiba scams and all that, we do realize that it's bad when people get scammed, and we don't want people getting scammed in Bitcoin, because it can, Bitcoin investment scams are almost as rife as other shitcoin scams. So I like the fact that the Bitcoin kind of community cares for itself. It doesn't have to, and people don't have to, and they're not obligated to. But a lot of people are really kind-natured, and they do try and deter people from investing in scams and making them, be a bit more vigilant.
And Ark, are you your brother's keeper, or is it enter at your own risk?
I think it's a yes, no, maybe. It reminds me that one of my favorite cities in the world is a place called Bern in Switzerland. And in Bern in Switzerland, you can Google it. There's this crazy river, which is like an alpine river, and it runs through the whole city at a phenomenal rate. And it's very shallow. And you look at it, and it's got all these swirling currents. It's the sort of river you were told never to go near as a child. Well, in Bern in Switzerland, the crazy Swiss, they jump in that river and they use it as a form of transport. If you want to get into town, you put all your stuff in like a waterproof bag, you jump in the river, you just float really fast along this river, and then you grab onto these bars coming off the side of the river, which you grab onto, and then you pull yourself out. And honestly, they're insane. I saw a pregnant woman with a dog grabbing onto one of these bars and pulling herself out of this crazy river. And I think in the UK that would be illegal. You wouldn't be allowed to jump in that river, but then people would, and they would hurt themselves. When you walk along the path running alongside this river, there's just loads of really nice public information. So it's be careful of logs floating on the river. When you jump in, it's shallow, so make sure you start kicking straight away. There's all this great just information so people are going to jump in the river, but just do it safely. And then when you actually stood on one of these bridges about to leap into the river, the local Swiss people would be like, oh, make sure you do it this way, make sure you do it that way. So you have guidance just from the town, which they've put up, and then you've also just got guidance from the locals who also. So I think that's where we are. We should give people good information and say to them, look, if you're going to do this, just don't put too much of your portfolio in there, and don't go for something which is too scammy, and don't smoke the opium and think you're going to make gazillions overnight. Take your time, blah blah blah. But then also, I think it is up to the role of society at large and governments to sort of recognize this new asset class, which is very easy to onboard onto, and just say, look, there are these risks attached to it. If you're going to do it, you can do it. It's fine, but just understand that there's these risk attacks attached to them, and some, you really need to look into the fundamentals of a project and how it works. Blah blah blah. So just education from general society, governments, whatever, but then also just with each other, we can help each other. So I always think of that crazy. Google it; it's insane. They're nuts. By the way, if you're ever in Bern in Switzerland, there's an amazing Bitcoin meetup. That's where Grugol, who works for LND, is from, and did all the macaroon stuff. And they're nuts, but it's a great city. Great city.
A very libertarian answer from Ben Ark. Keep the beach open. There are no sharks here. Carter from Bitsby Tripping, is it Bitcoiners' responsibility to warn others and protect against scams?
I don't know if I would tie the direct responsibility to them more than they have an interest. They have a vested interest to make sure people understand it. I think it's in everybody's best interest. I mean, that's, people ask all the time, like, why do you still make videos? I mean, you've been in this for a while, for a long time, mining and stuff. And I said, I look at it as like a social responsibility to ensure that people understand from an observe and report how things work. I think as more people start to do that, it does help the ecosystem, but I think it's also part of that evolution of innovation as we start to get better interfaces. We have, I don't want to call it rails, essentially set up to where it lessens that or creates a disincentive for folks to do a lot of these fraudulent activities. I mean, I'm more of a, if governments and folks are going to be involved, or large entities that are building on the Bitcoin blockchain, that they build innovation budgets to de-incentivize the activity of what's going on. So instead of trying to create a whole bunch of regulation around it, which create essentially people that will just, create other facets around the regulation to create innovation and incentivize activity for the opposite of that effect, to where maybe some of those would be folks that are going to go for the scammy side can actually say, hey, you know what, there's a honeypot out here that if I just actually be a contributor in the space, I can, take on some of that capital versus trying to scam people out of it. Give people opportunity to innovate it better. I mean, you look at how much money that is probably going to be spent by just the US government on this. I mean, it could be in the billions of dollars to create all kinds of regulatory framework where you could have a situation where you could say, you know what, how about we take about 2.5-3 billion of that, make an innovation fund, and not have a huge amount of capital out there for people to improve the ecosystem. It creates a different flip side of that incentive to maybe convince a handful of folks to not try to screw people out of it and say, there's a lot of, cheddar out here to go after. And it allows us to, have these innovation funds. There's examples of this out in the space. The Air Force does this with something called AFWorks out of Las Vegas, where they try to solicit small business to give them innovation stuff. You could be a business of one person and submit an idea to them and possibly get $1 million contract where they'll help you source people and all that. And that's just a person with an idea. I think investing, and they're kind of crawl, walk, running this ideology right now to try to get other innovation in the space. I think doing that will do more for the quick on ramp. So, you literally go out there, you register, you put forth an idea, and in, 48 hours, you have a response, right? And I think that could be the pivot to where people start innovating, kind of like a bug bounty program, but without a lot less paperwork, and just, attack it at its core, right? So, disincentivize that activity from people, give people outlets. I think you're still always going to have like a state actor issue with that, where there's still going to be attack vectors and stuff for people. But, I think it all comes back down to give people an incentive not to, try to screw people out of stuff by giving them a better incentive to participate. That's effectively what like proof of work is. We're all fighting for the same kind of thing at the chance that we're going to win. If you think about proof of work in general, it's like mind blowing. Like we're all going to compete on the same exact problem at the same exact time with the possibility that we're going to win. Right. And I think that's a good format to understand. Like if you put the carrot out there large enough, that people will do a lot of crazy things to build towards that. And I think putting, a large enough carrot out there to improve it would be, you'll at least, measurably reduce the amount of negative that'll come onto it. And you'll also not put so much restriction that disincentivizes like good participants to actually participate in the ecosystem. So I think it comes down to that. And we just got to educate, ironically, not just the users, but we got to educate our governments to make sure that they understand that that's a better way and don't turn crypto into like the war on drugs and spend a damn near $1 trillion trying to stop it. And now like almost every state opened up marijuana, which should have happened years ago. Right. So it's just like, let's get to the means to the end. The music industry moved a lot faster with like the RIA suing people back in Napster days. And then they were like, wait a minute, this tech's actually pretty good. Let's make Spotify and all this other stuff. And now they're making more money than they've ever made. So it's like, there's multiple examples in different, vertical channels. If it's music, if it's drugs, if it's whatever, where they can lean in versus hold back. And then you're going to get a lot of the behavior that they're trying to stop, ironically, out of the system because the incentive is out there for people to participate and not attack, if that makes sense.
Mining also seems like an evolutionary process. As you mentioned, all the miners out there competing, much like all the sperm trying to fertilize that egg. There's only one winner. It's all or nothing. And they're swimming towards their target full speed. But going back to some more,
that's an interesting take.
I could just I could see it. I could suddenly see it. But again, let's hope that's not happening. But going back to Bitcoiners, at the beginning, they did see themselves as kind of an antiviral system for Bitcoin. They were trying to defend the space. They were very stalwart and they attacked every new project, whether it was good or bad, whether they had good intentions, whether it was like an experiment, like, can we do this? Or whether it was, oh, yes, we can do this and we're going to make millions and billions. They attacked them all the same. But then I think people got tired of that. A lot of these projects were sincere. They did intend to experiment. Some of the experiments succeeded. Some of them failed. Some of them are still ongoing. So I think people have gotten tired of that. But this idea that Bitcoiners could somehow protect the others, and that there is a simpler way, and that you could just go with Bitcoin, still make a little money, but maybe it's not as risky. It's never going to work, right? That pitch is over. People want all the money yesterday, and they don't want any risk at all. And that doesn't exist anywhere, but they keep looking for it. And every time someone says it, whether it's a Shiba Inu coin or Raven coin or Dogecoin or whatever the new coin is, they always have the same kind of promises. And then we see in the end if they succeed or not. There are so many coins that have been forgotten. Everyone pretends, oh, coins just stay around forever. You know, Litecoin, Ethereum, WorldCoin, Megacoin, Primecoin, Peercoin, Curecoin, all these kind of things. They're all still around, right? And then some of them aren't. You look at it, some of them, and it's not like, it's hard to explain how a coin goes away. How if you had Megacoin in your wallet and you could send it to the other Megacoin wallets, but then one day no one's mining Megacoin anymore, and you still have it in your wallet. You still have it. You just can't send it to anyone, so you can't sell it. You can't use it. It's delisted from all the exchanges, and pretty soon everyone forgets it, and they just use it as a name to start a new coin. There's a new world coin coming out, so just ignore that old one coin. They've got a new one. Carter, you have more on this? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was actually talking with one of my friends that I've had in this space for a long time, Bitcoin Ben, and we were talking about some old coins that like Aurora and a few of the other old ones that kind of just fell off, and we took a little experiment one weekend, and we we're like, let's see if we can find one that actually has no nodes online, because I have a lot of the original like proof of work mining coins. I have a lot of those original nodes, and it's like I haven't kept up them running, but like I'm like, can we fire up a node and let's see if we can, where it goes to? Does it stop? Are we the broadcasting node? Are we the longest chain? Because if you're the only node, technically, once people start mining again, so we did a local mining, I think it was like Yaw coin as an example, and like we were the only node online. We started locally mining, and then we started moving the chain. And I'm like, we could broadcast this as it was like a no pre-mine. It was a start, I didn't have any of these coins. It was just like, let's fire this up. Well, let's see, we'll start mining. And then if we posted that on a forum, would other people be able to mine it? And it was like this little like weekend experiment and then we ended up seeing like 3 or 4 nodes pop online because people were like, oh, you guys are running this, and they downloaded it from us. And it was interesting to see kind of like a vampiric like resurrection of one of these networks, and then how they started up. And there are a lot of instances where coins have lost their either developer, and then they've lost like their node structure. And so there's no nodes, and then there's no miners. Even if a miner's locally mining, just the knowledge there, just the base knowledge to like make the export and go out there and find the GitHub and try to restart that coin. But I think that as things start to evolve and people start to have a better understanding, there's already colleges teaching cryptocurrency basics, right? So it's actually curriculum stuff out there to understand the basis of where cryptocurrency and, blockchain technologies, what's the differences, what's proof of stake, proof of work, proof of elapsed time, all the different consensus algorithms. As more people start to understand it, I can see a resurgence of the discovery phase of that. I see that whenever I post old content. Sometimes I go back into like the 2012, 2011 content, and I'll go to my repository for that, and I'll post a screenshot of like the Butterfly Labs, first launch of something mining and stuff, and the engagement rate that gets, and then the new people that come in that are like, hey, I've been studying this, and I'm super intrigued on this, because it's hard to find that content. Some of your old videos from like Mad Bitcoins, that kind of stuff. I think there's going to be an interesting resurgence just from a discovery phase on that, of where did these coins go? What was their value proposition? So yeah, it's interesting that you bring that point up, because I think that's, from a historical standpoint, I think people are curious of how those experiments run, and what caused their demise, as it starts to go there.
Well, and if pumping and dumping a coin on a market is like level 1, buying a bunch of it, selling it, whatever. What about getting a bunch of old miners, recreating the network, relaunching the coin? I mean, it's interesting to see Dogecoin, because Doge is one of the earlier coins. And because of whatever reason, Doge has been summoned up to the top by Elon Musk. It could have as easily been Feathercoin or Aurora Coin or Megacoin or WorldCoin or any of these coins he could have chosen. He says, oh, I like that, feather mascot. That does it for me. So I'm going to adopt it. And the same thing, you could take Feather now. I don't know for sure, but as an example, a coin like Feather, and you could get 5 or 6 miners, you and your buddy, and pretty soon you are the network and you're mining it, and you can send it around between yourselves, and it has no value and no exchange has it. But if it takes off, if it goes that way, I remember my friend Rhett Creighton did the same thing to Zcash. He edited Zcash. He took the founders reward out. He put the code back out there because he's a coder, and he's just kind of shrugs his shoulders. He's like, okay, that project's done, on to the next thing. And it became its own coin. Like you said, people just started popping up and mining it.
Yep.
And they started editing it and improving it. I think it's called Zcash or Zen or one of these things. It's hard to catch up on all those things, but it can just happen. He just published the code. I mean, he got super lucky. It was good code and all that. But
what happens when you have? So I was thinking about like drive chain stuff. So if you have BIP 300, if that got in, and then you just recreate Zcash, and you just blind merge mine it, then all these Bitcoin miners who are just running, like, it doesn't make any sense for them not to have that bit of software running as well. Like, would that create a world where some of these, I mean, you could make any old experiment and it'd be much harder to kill those altcoins, wouldn't it? Because these miners are just running anyway. These Bitcoin miners are just running anyway, and it's just part of their packaged mining software. Like, would that pose something of a threat in that, like, coins won't, there won't be an evolution of coins where they just naturally die out if no one cares about them, because it'll just continue to exist because the Bitcoin miners it's been hardened by the Bitcoin mining network.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ones that have done the merge mine there, they benefit from keeping the network. It all comes down to, is the nodes up, and is it, so they have the consensus, but the being ran in that node, is there a node network? Can people start to create other on ramps that are, if they can't get onto exchange? I mean, there was a live stream that I did. We were talking through some details related to like IBC, which, so it's like what Cosmos is trying to do from an internet blockchain of things, right? Where they want interoperability between all these different UTXO blockchains to EVM based blockchains like Ethereum, forks that are out there, and creating an interoperability to give an on-ramp possibility for those as just other unique assets. They happen to be tokens on, whatever network if we're using Feathercoin as an example, to where somebody can create that kind of service registry to Feathercoin's node. And now you can use Uniswap to get Feathercoin, right? And it's like wrapped Feathercoin. And then overnight you have all these like old school chains that now get like this kind of like Pabst Blue Ribbon of beer, right? It was gone. And then it became like the hipster kind of drink,
the renaissance of the alts.
Yeah. For sure. And then, you have this resurgence because people want some of the old networks that had very deep, rich histories. Feathercoin was a very like grassroots rich history. One of the fourth or fifth. I
think it was the first. It was the first, wasn't it? It's the first Bitcoin Feathercoin. Was it before?
It was. It goes Bitcoin, Litecoin, Purecoin, Namecoin, and then I think it was. A Feathercoin. So I think it was 6. And then like Darkcoin, which ended up becoming Dash. But like I did a little cryptocurrency back in like 2014 or something on the channel. It's like my 8th video or whatever, and I gave homage to all the coins out there at the time. So I always go back to there, like, let me watch this again, because I did it in chronological order of release. But like I can see that becoming a thing as more and more folks start to understand it. And I use that from a premise. There's actually a video that we have coming out today. I have a couple younger guys are 17 or about to be 18. They help me do yard work and stuff out here, and they've been learning, like I've been explaining like crypto and stuff to them, and it's interesting to hear their perspective and like the school's perspective and that kind of senior year this year of where people are trying to understand the crypto space. And I was thinking, oh, they're going to be all Doge or Shibu guys, but they're actually asking about like the history of like, well, where did it come from? And where were some of these other coins? And like, yeah, we're talking at it at school. What's pure coin? I'm like, oh my God, dude, I haven't heard that in forever. Like, so it's interesting to see and hear some of the youngest generation coming up that's coming into this space, that's getting access to liquidity, and where they're trying to understand it. And is that going to be a thing that kind of merges the tech stack where you have like Cosmos enabling those things to be able to be accessible from like the DeFi markets that are out there? It's going to be an interesting thing. I mean, what is the use case that it's doing? And at the end of the day, it comes down to like, well, if it's accessible, why do people buy half the ERC tokens out there, right? If it's not trying to, you know, pump whatever, or they're trying to provide liquidity to it, you could get into this weird conundrum where you have this whole DeFi marketplace that's enabling all these other tokens that never had any kind of thing, but they do have rich histories, you know, with a lot of, I would say kind of old OG crypto folks that may have small bags on them or whatever, that they get resurrected, who knows? But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing that could be happening in the next few years for that. I can see people resurrecting that just from that whole thing. It was like, we weren't trying to resurrect like Yawcoin to, you know, try to do anything with it. It was more of like the technical exercise, like what's the blockchain height is. And if we exceed what the last known one was, then we technically have the longest chain. And if other nodes come on and connect to us, then that is the version of truth, right? Because it wasn't in any exchange. And it's interesting from an experiment standpoint, doing that with an older chain versus trying to just like copy code and create your own, because, you know, it already has some history out there.
It's important to remember Feathercoin. Feathercoin was like the first community coin. And a lot of the ideas behind Dogecoin, like having fun and having a community, came from Feathercoin. Jackson Palmer himself later on said that and agreed that Feather had been a major inspiration when they were starting Doge. So maybe you guys are going to go Google Feathercoin now. It sounds like fun. So have fun. Watch some Chris Ellis videos. But to go back to Ben's question, there is a big advantage to being on a main chain. If altcoins of the future are attached to Bitcoin in some way and get the benefit of being mined by Bitcoin and perhaps even just forgotten by Bitcoin and Bitcoiners, they could come out really large in the future. I remember when we started Curio cards in 2017, we had the option. We could have made a copy of Ethereum and had Curio Ethereum, and we would have mined it and we would have gotten all the coins and we would have been market makers and all that. But if we stopped mining it, the project would pretty much go away. Like we could archive the chain somewhere and hope it comes back. But instead we released them on Ethereum as ERC20 tokens. And then, you know, the sands of time and NFTs came and went and all of that. And later on, someone went back in that Ethereum blockchain, you know, being led there by the breadcrumbs on the internet, and they found Curio cards. So we benefited greatly by Ethereum still being here, still mining it, all of the things still generally working, even for an old hacked up ERC20 token NFT, still functional. So if they had that same option now with Bitcoin, it could be an incredible advantage to altcoins of the future.
By the way, everyone out there, you need to support BIP 300 Drive Chains. Go watch Paul Schultz and his talk at Bitcoin Miami. It's very good.
All right, I think we have to move on to the next issue. We got caught in the exit question there. Issue 4, Ethereum Roundup. Valid points. The fate of Ethereum miners when there's nothing left to mine. What happens to all of the miners on Ethereum when Ethereum switches from proof of work to proof of stake? And will this switch cause Ethereum to become the dominant store of value? Perhaps a pun there on proof of stake and proof of work. Goldman, Sachs, and others are backing the Bitcoin competitor. Let's go first to Carter from Bitsby Tripping. What are your thoughts on the coming switch of Ethereum from proof of work to proof of stake? Will this make all of the current people who currently mine Ethereum, will this put them out of business?
No. Spoiler alert. No, I don't think so. So I've done some pretty deep analysis on this. I'm actually in that article, I think, at the bottom of that article, that first one. With Christina Kim reached out from CoinDesk to ask for some points on that. And what I effectively covered in there is there's I've done quite a bit of research on it, made that public. I have a huge spreadsheet to show various price discoveries that would need to happen to make up that, delta. When you look at the Ethereum network, it's two sectors. There's the ASICs, which are Ethash, and then there's the GPU side. The GPU side right now, based on what's been shut down, we've seen Ethereum peak at about 650 terahash, and it's sitting around 490 terahash right now. And remember, at 650 terahash, even though it was $4,300 ETH price, there was if you take 650 terahash and look at $2,500 ETH price or 2,200, it's still profitable. So there was nothing that should have stopped the growth of it continuing past 650. At about 750 at $2,500, it would become unprofitable, even at 2.5 ETH per block pricing. So what that shows is a lot of the stuff that's gotten shut down in China was about 220 terahash, and most of that being mainly ASICs. So that gives you the kind of scale and scope of what that was, is about 35%, 36%. I think for a long time we were saying it was closer to probably 40%. Obviously those ASICs have proliferated not just in China, so there's still Ethereum ASICs out there. So when Ethereum moves, why it's relevant, the whole point of me saying that is it gives you a dynamic of where the GPU hash rate is going to go. So if we look at 150 to 200 terahash being GPU, that's really the size of pie that's going to spread across the other networks. So it comes down to what are those other networks? Well, Ethereum Classic and Ravencoin are the two largest networks that can take on that hash rate, at least at 200 terahash hash rate. It would make it unprofitable unless Ethereum Classic moves back up over $125 per coin. Right now it's sitting at about 35 to 40. When it hit 175, it actually had enough to almost take on most of that 200 terahash. And it's literally a simple math problem. If you look at Ethereum Classic at $175, look at Ethereum 2 years ago at $86, right? When it was $86, it was putting out right there at 3 coin. They went from the 3 coin to 2 coin hard fork. And when right around the same time that the price went down at $86 and people had to shut down and the network went down to about 160 terahash. So Ethereum Classic right now is showing you that it already can take on more than half of the Ethereum GPU network right now, sitting at like $50. So then that means the rest of the half needs to come over to some other network or be spread across the other different coins out there. And I've done a pretty deep analysis on that. I took the top like 25 hash rate, proof of work networks out there. So that's Ergo, that's a whole bunch of VTC, Vertcoin, all these different networks. And I looked at it proportionally, how much hash rate needed to come over to them and what was their price that it needed to get to. If, something like Ravencoin went to 51 cents, it could take on the entire Ethereum network of hash rate. If it sits at 25 cents, which it hit 27 cents in May, it could take on that other half that's required. So bottom line, to sum all that up, is the two largest networks right now at their current price points are pretty close to be able to take on a majority of that hash rate as it sits. Now, what the question is, what happens with that other 200 to 300 terahash of ASICs? That's going to be the pivot point of what network is going to fork back to Ethash. So you have Ubik, you have ETC with their ETC cache. Are one of them going to fork back because they have the highest potential to gain all that ASIC hash power? That's where you have Lindsay and Lindsay Tech, which is Silicon, lobbying right now. You see that they actually have in this article that they're lobbying some of these other networks, Ethereum Cooperative, the ETC Cooperative rather, and a few other networks to try to lobby for them to go back to Ethash. So then there's a place for those ASICs because there's a huge amount of investment in that. So it all comes back down to consensus. People are like, oh, that's like some kind of gaming. It's consensus at the end of the day. You want to have your best option, your best amount of hash rate. So it really comes down to who's going to take back over to Ethash and then who's going to take all the GPUs. So it's not going anywhere.
How exciting for Ethereum Classic to come back again. Just the original sin comes back to haunt them. The fork forever. Dan, Eve, your thoughts on Ethereum and the possible upcoming switch to proof of stake?
Technically, that surely F Classic's not the original sin though, because that wasn't the chain that was like rolled back, right? Wow, wow, wow.
And the chain stays with the other chain, yes.
So I think so there'll be more shitcoins invented that are mineable, right? That there may even be like some collection of miners, GPU miners who've got a big farm that kicks something off just to kind of compete with F Classic and Raven, and to bring a new GPU mining coin out there. That's definitely a possibility. It does seem like I don't know whether AMD will follow suit, but video they're blocking or limiting the mining now on the 3060 Ti, 3070, and 3080. So if AMD start doing that, that would be interesting for the playing field. But what does make me laugh is that going back on the Shiba coin, they launched their Uniswap clone the other day, and it started getting used, and everyone on Ethereum started kicking off because the chain was being used and it was slowing down again and putting transaction fees up. And it just seems like Ethereum's like the only chain where everyone starts to use it and people get pissed off, whereas every other chain they're like, yeah, please use our, we need to show that it's being used, definitely. But the flippening, no, I don't think so. I mean, the DeFi craze has had an incredible meteoric rise, but I just think once you get DeFi properly on Bitcoin, then it show's over.
Ben, ARK.
Support BIP 300 drive chains, so then you can have all this DeFi on Bitcoin, all this shitcoin. You can just go to Bitcoin, and it renders all this stuff completely redundant because it's no longer a house built on sand. The ETH2 switch, I looked at their proposal for the transition, and it looked scary. It made my stomach churn when I was looking at the proposal for it. I mean, if it works, whatever, you end up with a proof of stake coin. Proof of stake to me just feels like the same sort of neoliberal control we've always had. That the people with the bags control the money. It's not very, very exciting. So sadly, proof of work is the best solution. So I say sadly, obviously, because of its huge carbon footprint. And there isn't a better solution currently. So we just have to mine Bitcoin more efficiently. But yeah, I mean, it's a big experiment, the transition to ETH2, and all these miners are going to go somewhere. And I do think there will be another renaissance of the ETH Classic. But maybe if the transition to ETH2 goes well, then people get all excited and start pumping into that. But they've just got this crazy amount of front end devs, which Bitcoin should have. But these people want to innovate. I think I said this in the last one, is the last Bitcoin group, that Vitalik, he was a Bitcoiner, but he was impatient. He wanted the promise of smart contracts and everything they can do, but he wanted it now. He didn't want to wait until it came onto Bitcoin, and it was developed in a slow, sober way. He wanted it now. He wanted to be reckless. He wanted it now, and that's where Ethereum came from. And lots of people did. And it's the same with Zcash. They want certain functionality and they want it now, and they can't wait for it on Bitcoin. But as Dan said, it will all come onto Bitcoin. It's just a matter of time. The proposals are there, but Bitcoin develops slowly because it's very conservative in its development, because obviously it's got this money at stake, whereas some of these other chains don't. But yeah, in the short term, I don't know, maybe Ethereum could flip Bitcoin, but it doesn't matter because the Bitcoin is Bitcoin's the network. The rest of them, they're kind of experiments and glimpses into a possible future that will exist on Bitcoin. It's just a matter of time until we get it. And if you're really keen on all this functionality, which Bitcoin hasn't got at the moment, then support drive chains, BIP 300.
Just to build a little bit on what Ben said, a lot of the differences between Bitcoin and Ethereum come down to centralization versus decentralization. Centralization is a lot easier. It's a lot faster. It's a lot more controllable decentralization is a lot harder. It's a lot slower, but it's a lot harder to control. And from the beginning, Ethereum has made many choices that have led it towards centralization. The early pre-mine given to their developers and their supporters, leading to a lot of people centralized holding the coin. The production restriction that they did, favoring the people who would hold on to their early pre-mine, and now the switch from proof of work to proof of stake, literally favoring the people who have the largest proof of stake, the people who have the early pre-mine. The potential for centralization in a proof of stake system has often been discussed as one of the problems. It seems as if proof of stake itself academically leads towards centralization and elite control, which are radically different ideas than Bitcoin. That's why the Ethereum Bitcoin thing's always been such a back and forth. Everyone wants to say, oh, they're all cryptocurrencies. They're interchangeable like Kleenex or Band-Aids. But each one is uniquely for a different problem. Ethereum solves this problem of having smart contracts. Bitcoin solves the problem of internet money. So it's very different problems, but because they're in the same category, because they're all cryptocurrencies, they must just be interchangeable like toast.
You're 100% like nail on the head. Like you have Vitalik there, and he's surrounded by all these sycophants who are like, yeah, come on, Vitalik, let's strengthen our position, give us more power, give us more money. And obviously the network's going to lean in that direction. Obviously, you can argue the environmental concerns, and people will, that proof of stake is so much more environmentally friendly, but you're just creating that same neoliberal control we've already had. So there's no point, it's that vanguard technocratic control, which doesn't exist in Bitcoin, and as soon as it does exist, it gets just attacked and decentralized out. So yeah, it's just a matter of time till all this functionality comes to Bitcoin. And I want that to happen because honestly, I think Vitalik's a Bitcoiner. He worked, he edited Bitcoin magazine all these years ago, and he just wanted this functionality to exist. It didn't exist, and he had to move to something else. As soon as it exists on Bitcoin, he'll come flooding back with all those great front end developers, and Bitcoin will be the richer for it. So,
only Nixon could go to China. Carter, did you have more on this?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at even Ethereum had, it started with Charles Hodgson, Dr. Gavin Wood, and Vitalik, and who's the other guy that's always on there, the bald head? I can't think of his name. He's just the money guy for Consensus. That were the main core, the financier, and then the three developers, and those two guys, left to make their own. And you have Polkadot with Dr. Gavin Wood, and then you have the Cardano with Charles Hodgson, and it's the same kind of story where people had ideas and they wanted it now, and they were like, whatever, I'll just I'll go build it myself. And they're competing. They're all competing on a platform. I look at Bitcoin's, and I've heard this from other folks, and I agree with it. It's art is in its simplicity and its refinement and design, that it hasn't been a need for a lot of change when it comes to just the core operations of it. There is an existential thing that you can put on top of that to expedite, some of the functionality, add more features to it, but not compromise that underlying structure that it has. Ethereum trying to tackle something, in my opinion, different. The narrative is switching it to say, oh, it's ultrasound money and it's going to take over this, because that's the investment guys trying to make money on it, right? But the core premise of what Ethereum and Cardano and all those are trying to do are become platforms where you can build other stuff on top of. Circumstantially, they have a token under it because that's the way the mechanics work. But it's became, because of that narrative, about money, and it's people posing like, hey, it's going to grow better and it's going to be the store of value. That article, it even says that it's a store of value, is nonsensical. It has no upper limit. It's made to use. It's made to be fuel. It's not a store of value. Like by design, it's not a store of value. You spend it to make things function. From a platform standpoint, I mean, there can be platforms that could be built onto Bitcoin. But I think these different chains facilitate specific things that are more conducive to whatever their ideology was, and people will either build things on top of it. Ethereum was just got that first mover advantage to where all the developers came to it. I mean, Solidity as a language sucks. I don't know if anybody's tried to code in it, but it's not a good language. it's gotten better, but it's not one that you could create a lot of complexity with. That's why you have these other chains that have spun up and have, Java clients, JavaScript clients, Python clients, those sorts of things to allow more innovation on them. But, I don't look at it as like I can see from a premise of trying to build things onto Bitcoin, to provide that underlying core structure and then that value proposition. But I think we're going to see even more competitors come out against, Ethereum and that kind of concept of, the smart contract platform. And if that ends up hopefully would get built onto Bitcoin, that'd be great. But I think that as that next series of innovation starts to come up, we see some of these younger developers come up and look at all of them and go, you all are crazy. Here's a better solution, right? And if that's going to come out with proof of work or have some kind of interconnect with Bitcoin where it actually is using Bitcoin from consensus standpoint, but is providing a new way of value, it's going to be a competition. It's going to be a continued competition under the same premise that we've seen from everybody that's forked off and done their own thing. I don't think that's one constant that's not going to stop. And that usually sometimes comes just from one argument, be it on Twitter or whatever. I mean, we're seeing that right now. And I don't know if anybody's tracking some of the stuff with the MEV discussion on Ethereum. But that's happening literally in real time with Hatsu, which is a researcher that covers a lot of Ethereum stuff, got into an argument with one of the Flashbot MEV folks. And it's turned into now where he's like, well, I'm going to create an offensive weapon for MEV and I'm going to make it open source. And then we're just going to nuke Ethereum from orbit. And he's already posted it on GitHub and he's already made it open source. He was going to keep it. So you're already seeing this kind of effect of how quick something can pivot. And I think that still transcends down to new innovations in, the crypto space. And we'll see. I mean, hopefully people choose Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin has a huge advantage when it comes into from, you have El Salvador making it as legal tender. If you have other countries start to make it as legal tender, there's rationale for more functionality built on top of it to facilitate, higher speed transactions, that sort of thing. So Bitcoin has that advantage to where, countries are choosing to use it as, not just a store of value, but an enabler for potential currency. Ethereum isn't there yet, right? They're not talking Ethereum on that, right? They're talking Bitcoin. So, and it's the same thing, that conversation with Janet Yellen and looking at ESG concerns and all this stuff. They're not talking about Ethereum. They're talking about Bitcoin, right? So from a state level, legislative level, large situational awareness level, we see our own Congress folks in the US, say, well, there's Bitcoin, and then a congressman saying, and everything else is shit coins, right? I think you have that understanding that Bitcoin has a lot more, call it cloud or call it understanding that it is the foundation. And I don't see that interrupting anytime soon. So yeah, that article is crazy talk. Ethereum is not going to be the ultimate store of value. I think it's just, corporate people that probably invested in Ethereum and invested at 4,300, seen it at 3,500 and saying, or 2,500 saying, gotta pump this up, my dudes.
Exit question, forced prediction. Will the flippening occur? Will the price and value of Ethereum surpass the price and value of Bitcoin? Dan Eve, Crypto Raptor.
I don't think so.
Ben Ark.
Sorry, what was the question? Sorry.
Will the flippening occur? Will Ethereum flip Bitcoin?
For what price? There's a lot of traction on Ethereum. People are building all these NFTs and things, blah blah blah. But I mean, it may, but it doesn't really matter because it's not, as it's been commented, it's not designed as a store of value. So ultimately, no, it doesn't matter. But it could potentially have more interest and a higher value for a short period of time.
Michael Carter.
If you're talking market cap, it could, if there's more expansion on its underlying market standpoint when it comes to like NFTs and the marketplace stuff as a foundation. And Bitcoin and has, it's a singular UTXO store of value. Ethereum gets an advantage from its platform and the fact that it has multiple streams of potential income standpoints, from NFTs to DeFi to all that stuff, and it being the underlying fuel from just a mechanical reason only. I think it could have that flippening, but from a store value, no, because if you look at the base concept that you got to spend it, why do I want to have a token that's a higher value? And we see that already. When it went to $4,400, Ethereum effectively stopped. Transaction volume effectively stopped. People stopped transacting in it because it was just too expensive. So you only had whales moving in it. I think the use case outright showed itself there. That, layer 2, Matic, that kind of thing kind of picked up a lot of that slack for them. But yeah, I don't think ultimately it isn't. Bitcoin wins it.
The answer is maybe yes, because it's something that Ethereum people care about, and Bitcoin, the honey badger, just doesn't care. So if Bitcoin is not manipulating its network to make sure it's the most valuable and all these things, and Ethereum is, they just might take it. Moving on to issue 6, special bonus issue. The defense industry has started seizing Bitcoin being used by Hamas. Digital funds and digital wallets have been seized by Israel from the terror group Hamas, presumably similar to the hack of the pipeline in the United States, where one of the servers belonging to the hackers was seized. Bitcoin itself was not broken, but something we talk about almost every week is finally here. Bitcoin is being connected to terrorism. Ben, Art, can we expect a quick clamp down on Bitcoin, all of the banks abandoning it, Michael Saylor being hung in effigy, Elon Musk transcendent and correct, as now suddenly Bitcoin is terrorist financing?
I mean, it's interesting going back to our previous topic on China. I don't think the US can ban something which China is also banning. Like, they can't share an enemy. So it's probably
the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The enemy of my friend is my enemy.
Exactly. So if they're going to keep this kind of Cold War China narrative going, then they're probably going to have to really big up Bitcoin, and then not attack it for being the chosen value transfer mechanism for terrorists and drug dealers and whatever else. They're using it for remittance. They're using it to transfer funds because it's good money and it works. Good digital transfer. Value transfer medium of exchange, because it works. It's ultimately should be a selling point for Bitcoin, really. The Hamas are using it, but yeah, I mean, there will be some FUD around it, because obviously it's about all states relinquishing control, which is very hard for them. And actually, I do think that this China FUD stuff is going to play ultimately in our favor, because they're staking their flag in the sand and saying, no, Bitcoin is bad for us commies, and then for the rest of the free world, such as the US, then they're not going to be able to stake the same flag because of it. So it will be used as FUD potentially by some politicians, but I think generally, people just understand it as a way people transfer value over the internet. When you watch these news programs now over some ransomware attack or whatever, and this happened, the WannaCry, in fact, and somewhere I have a Reddit post, which is I refer back to for my ego. Somewhere I have a Reddit post on the WannaCry attack, on how I noticed at that point the narrative wasn't, look, there's this evil internet money which is allowing these things to happen. There was, look, this evil thing has happened, and they used this internet currency called Bitcoin. And even recently, I watched a news article, a news video. I can't remember who it was. It's even a US sort of right-wing type news show thing on the internet, on YouTube. But they didn't discuss. They didn't implicate Bitcoin as being the problem. The problem, I think this was probably over the pipeline attack thing. They talked about the attack being a problem, and then they used Bitcoin as just a transfer mechanism. So no advertising, bad advertising. And I think this just, most people subconsciously would just understand that preferencing this value transfer over the internet over other value transfers over the internet because it's effective and it works. And I do think that the China FUD is going to ultimately play in our favor in the West when it comes to the US not being. I mean, if China had embraced Bitcoin, then the US would be like, okay, Bitcoin's for terrorists and for the commies, and we don't want to use it. Okay, and look at all these Central American countries which are using it as well. It's evil. We need to clamp down on it. Whereas now it's like, what can they say? They're gonna have to embrace it. And then the terrorist FUD will only go so far. So that's it.
I think it's exciting. We finally brought the US and China together over their mutual hatred of Bitcoin. And I agree with Ben. It's interesting to see them go from because to and. This server was hacked because of the cryptocurrency Bitcoin to this server was hacked and they use the cryptocurrency Bitcoin. We're just a side player. It's no longer because the money was available that the hack was done. So they are getting a better understanding of hacks and how the world works. I'm sure they'll remember this for other issues and try to seek a nuanced perspective rather than just being superficial. Let's go to Carter from Bitsby Tripping. Your thoughts on Hamas and Bitcoin terrorism?
Well, I mean, I think I'm looking at it more, I guess, less cynical and just if there's funds and they can't use traditional finance because obviously the centralized banks can shut things down. It's a natural order that they're going to go to cryptocurrency, right? I think that if they're trying to raise funds in any way, we see that with, just creators that have been shut down, right? That lose their accounts, they move to maybe some other like DTube or some other platform, and then they're taking, their Patreons get shut down. If you start to lose all that access, you're going to gravitate naturally to things that you have access to, which is going to be crypto. But it comes back to where the hot wallets are stored. And, is this complacency? Is this where, I don't think the article explains how they were able to get that. I don't obviously think that it was cracked or anything like that. It was that they got a hold of these hot wallets, maybe in seizures or whatever. And I think it's just, it's probably being played up because the crypto is part of that. Crypto in general right now is a hot topic in world news in general. So it happened to happen and it was crypto. So now it's a headline. But I think you're going to see more of that to where the sophistication of the enforcement is going to be at a level of as they understand more of where to go get it and how to seize it. You're going to see more of those articles to where it's going to be harder for those things to, transact. Additionally, the second order and third order effects when they're trying to use that currency in places, and then leaning on those folks that now cross those honeypots, you're going to see more of that. So it's going to lead back to where the source of the crypto came from. Again, it's showing that it's good money in all frameworks, including enforcement, right? So like I don't look at it as like any kind of like bigger issue than that. I think the media is going to make it a bigger issue that now this is another funding source that they're shutting down. But from the US coming out writing and trying to ban, that's one of the fortunate things of living in the US and having the rules and the guidance that, having three branches of government separated in the way it is that even if the federal government came out and tried to quote unquote ban it, it doesn't work that way without a state level, that they can put a mandate out there. And then the states will look at it and go, yeah, cool story, man. We're not going to do that. And you see that right now, even which is like the drug side. I'll go back to like marijuana, right? It's federally illegal. But at a state level, it's not in certain states. And it's just the way our government structure is set up. And it has a lot of flaws in it. But when you look at just the basic premise of the way that structure is, the folks that live in the US benefit from a lot of that kind of diversity of structure. And I think, that's going to play out probably in the US at some point to where you'll have even the strongest opinion against crypto. Especially if something terrible happens in the world and it was financed by crypto, which is still, I think, one of those kind of elephant in the room probabilities that if something substantial happens and it was enabled because it was actually paid for by crypto because all the other facets were shut down, that could be an attack vector in the space of saying, well, this is why it happened. It's like, well, cash also could have happened too, right? But that shouldn't be just like some of these stories where there's the large hack that just occurred over this weekend, where there's $70 million worth of crypto being asked for by a hack group that's allegedly in Russia. The story isn't about the hack, right? The story's about crypto. And it's like, dude, that's just what they're trying to get paid in. Like, the problem is this SaaS that was used by several companies to manage their IT framework was exploited at the supply chain level. That's a huge issue. Like, we should look at the cybersecurity side of that and look at their processes and stuff like that as the premise of what the real issue is, and have nothing. The fact that they're trying to get paid is just circumstantial, right, for their efforts. It comes back down to, again, to core cybersecurity issues, but it's another example of where this crypto, misinformation, or the understanding like what's important in that messaging is being focused on the crypto side, which it really shouldn't be. It should be on the cybersecurity side. In that instance, with like this Hamas thing in general, it's just, again, being glorified that's where the story's at, where it should be more towards around what the real root issue is. So I think eventually people will just get kind of tired of hearing the crypto side of it. And especially if you're a business being hacked, you could care less the fact that they're getting paid in crypto. You're going to be calling up the company going, why the hell was I hacked? Right. You don't care about the crypto side. So I think it's just going to come around. Maybe if the media companies get attacked like that in some way, they're going to be talking about the risk of cybersecurity and open, closed source software issues and supply chain than the crypto issue.
It reminds me a lot of something Andreas Antonopoulos used to say. I'm not sure he ever wrote it in his books, but he used to say, if your currency can't be used to buy hookers and blow, it's not very good currency. Dan, Eve, your thoughts on Hamas and Bitcoin terrorism?
I think Michael made a really good point there about the fact that if it's a huge event, like if it's a huge event, that's the big. If it's like a 9/11 style thing, that's going to be where the big problem is, like where it's on the map. Whereas they're kind of pretty numerous now. That, I mean, we shrug them off, because we see all the reasons behind why it's not actually such a problem. The pipeline was solved really quickly. Why was that solved quickly? Well, because Bitcoin's not completely anonymous like everyone thinks. It's pseudonymous. So that was a learning curve for certain people, and these stories are going to fizzle out because it's going to be a null issue, and people will focus on the fact that the bad thing is the bad tech that's governing your company. It's not the fact that Bitcoin's being used. And we've said this before. It could be goats. It could be not that goats is a coin, but it could be goats. They're a lot harder to transport. There's not infinite goats. They probably could, depending on the size of the planet and stuff. But regardless, it's just a means of it's a value, isn't it, of being able to extract from someone by pulling them to ransom. The important thing is that the tech is a lot more secure, and people are more wary of security around technology, and especially over the internet, because of data leaks. The fact that was it I can't remember what coin it was the other day, and they kind of they asked a question, and someone said, they said, what was the biggest event or something, and they said, perhaps it was seeing my name and address from the data leak from your website. People are more concerned about their data and their information now, and we're taking security a lot more seriously. But yeah, I think ultimately it's no more a threat than it has been before. It's just the fact that Bitcoin is the big talking point at the moment because it's just gone through a massive pump. And yeah, I hope that it just doesn't get used in a kind of a huge event. But if it does, and they say ban Bitcoin, then someone will use Monero. They'll use something else. There will be something else. There'll be whack-a-mole, but with different cryptocurrencies, and that will just be an endless cycle until it's accepted and until there's good enough infrastructure built around it, and but dare I say it, more services like Chainalysis for catching the ransom people when they do ransomize people.
Well, if there's a major event in terrorism, I hope they do use Bitcoin.
Well, I think we're seeing already a kind of a I would call it a front running of the mindset, at least in the the government legislation side of it, because I don't know which representative it was, but I was given a clip that, he's like going back, I think it was one of the security hearings, and he was like, 99% of the crypto, or 99% of the cash transfers for illicit activity goes uncaught, and it was like the counterpoint to them about, on the crypto side of where at least they have telemetry and forensics, and it's all about behavior, looking at good behavior versus bad behavior. And that's not like looking at even like taxations or anything that has to do with more civil type of issues. I'm talking like bad things, bad people trying to harm people, usage, and, where crypto has at least a trail, and why I didn't get it right maybe before it or during it. There's still a lot of forensics that can go on the backside of it. And even on like privacy coins and all that kind of stuff, when you still have, a debit and a credit somewhere, you can start to still trace where certain things and assets were bought and stuff like that. It's not why it gives you that level of privacy in between. The same thing with Taproot. That's why I think we're seeing the maturity in general in the space, not just from the governments, but maturity from the technical side, where we didn't see this huge uproar about Taproot, about like, oh, you're gonna cause all this issue and all this innovation is going to get shut down because now they can't see certain in-flight activity, right? And what it really comes down to is they understand the UTXO. You're still going to have a debit and a credit on both sides of it. What happens in the middle, it's actually a good thing to have privacy of calls. It's like why we can make a point-to-point call and we don't have everybody just listening in all the time, right? You have still some level of anonymity on that conversation, and that we can have a transaction that can have some, obfuscation to it. It doesn't completely, shield it from not being able to be still discovered, from an input and output standpoint. There's still telemetry that can be garnered from it. So you're seeing some maturity, I think, in the space and on the telemetry side too, that they're saying, hey, yeah, this creates some complexity in the middle. However, of the things that we really care about at the end of the day, from the transferring from entities and stuff, we still have now enough understanding that from a discovery standpoint, we can still find things that we need to find. And that's why you're not seeing this huge push on Taproot. Taproot hasn't even really been brought up in the conversation, short of the acknowledgement that it's a thing and it's moving forward. But from, the risk and the government and all that stuff bringing it up, I haven't seen anything come out heavily on it. And, even security experts out there freaking out about like, oh, well, this is all going to be hidden and now we're not going to catch anything. And the same reasons why we don't see a huge amount of noise on like Monero. And, you got your outlier folks that are out there like, oh, it's been cracked for years. They're just, they're sitting there watching all the transactions. I mean, there's no proof of that, but it's also not upsetting the balance of, short of a few comments every once in a while that you'll see on uninformed people that may get on to a congressional hearing or something and they just talk about crypto being obfuscated and they can't see anything or something to that effect, that they're not really read in yet. But, I'm not worried about it in the long run. I think that it adds a lot more value added into the ecosystem and makes people more transparent. I'll bridge part of that to also why I think we haven't seen the Chinese government or any of the other governments come out with their own stablecoin yet, because when you start looking at, like, this is me kind of putting the architecture hat on, when you start looking at the second and third order effects of that, if you have a country that likes to manipulate its currency, even if it has a centralized currency that it wholesale controls, when you start looking at like how stablecoins connect, and you're going to have third parties that are going to be using said stablecoin, even in a centralized way, they're going to have nodes. So like if you're going in and manipulating your nodes and all those second and third order effect things that you've connected in, like service registries and Oracle services and all these other things that make the smart contracts work, you can't go in and start manipulating your currency, because you're going to start breaking all the nodes and you're going to break all of them. And, they're not going to be fully coordinated, right? Because it's just the complexities that we have in the typical centralized world, where you change an API, it's going to break somebody downstream. So you're starting to see as they map those out and map out those stable coins and look at like, well, yeah, we'll use this. It's a better innovation. And then they start looking at some of those use cases where they're going to make changes or potentially have to manipulate something that they just can't do it like they can do right now behind the covers. that it's transparent. Even a stable coin that's spun up by a government is transparent, at least internally, to and all those other people that they're having an effect to, that are going to be receiving that downstream, or any other participants that are going to be processing it are going to have nodes that are going to, they can't go back in and reorg. They're going to be like, wait, you're breaking all my stuff here, because you went in there and you just changed like supply numbers and stuff. So they have to do an append only log, just like everything else. And it's going to have some kind of accountability, like an accrual. So, you're starting to see, it's going to be fun to see when which entity first creates that, which government treasury actually does that, because it's going to be, even being centralized, it's still going to have some level of, accountability.
That's interesting, because I always think with Bitcoin, like, even though we have all these coin mixers and other options, whatever, it needs to work towards zero knowledge proof and just ultimate privacy, just to get the fungibility, because you don't have fungibility unless you have that when you scale up. And if you don't have fungibility, then it's not a good medium of exchange. So I think with all these like state actors, it's all about control. And like I was saying in the last topic, with the China juxtaposed with the US, and the US can't, not like something which the Chinese also don't like, because they don't, they can't agree on something. But actually, it does expose that Bitcoin's primary use case, which is to disrupt their control over monetary supply and disrupt state control, is affected by Bitcoin. And that's why the US wouldn't like it, just as the Chinese wouldn't like it. So actually, for people, maybe it'll make them aware that, the Chinese government hasn't got that much. There's not that much difference with the US government. It's they don't want to relinquish that control, and they're going to fight to the death to keep it. But with all this chain analysis type stuff, it scares me, and I think ultimately we need to move towards zero knowledge proof. And if you want to reveal yourself, then that's an option. But the default should be that it's completely and utterly private, and it's possible, but it's something Bitcoin needs to develop and get better at.
Double muted. All right. Moving on to the exit question. Clash of the Titans heavyweight championship fight. What's the worst FUD for Bitcoin? Is it Bitcoin and terrorism, or Bitcoin and energy usage? Ben Ark.
It's going to be Bitcoin and energy usage. That's going to be, it's valid. We have a big carbon footprint on transactions, so technology just needs to get better. And it's good news. The Chinese mining, filling China and all that cheap government subsidized coal power is good. We'll bring that percentage up for renewables, mining Bitcoin, which is a good thing, and hopefully incentivize renewables. But yeah, it's going to be the climate change stuff, maybe not terrorism, but I do think that with the stuff which is going on in El Salvador, that's going to really ruffle the feathers of the US and their control of Central America, and they may spin it in some way, and they'll use whatever's at hand, terrorism, environmental stuff. But and if they do play we should clamp down on Bitcoin, then hopefully people will realize that it's for the same reason that the Chinese government want to clamp down on Bitcoin.
We're running out of time. Crypto Raptor, terrorism or energy use, which is the worst FUD for Bitcoin?
Energy use by far. It's such a massive topic, and it was the thing that knocked the whole, knocked Musk off his Bitcoin pedestal, when he sort of pulled Tesla back from accepting Bitcoin. So I think it's very topical, and it's going to be here to stay. And fingers crossed, we're just not going to see like shitty terrorist attacks happening that would make Bitcoin be banned for that reason. So yeah, I think it's climate change, unfortunately.
I can't believe what I'm hearing. Surely someone must think about the children. Carter from Bits Be Trippin'. Are you going to go with them? Go with the energy usage over the terrorism?
Yeah, it's for sure energy use, mainly because it's a direct order effect, right? It's it literally is connected to Bitcoin uses energy. It's directly connected, and what that energy mix is right now a current very hot topic. And we know the back end effects that it naturally will go to the most cheapest energy and what that is, but energy directly. The terrorism piece, why it could be pushed heavily to be an enabler of that, that's not the first order effect of it. That the act is the issue, right, with that. So it could definitely be a tagline like we're seeing on all the rest of these things, but people are going to quickly not care about how it was financed and why it happened and why it wasn't prevented, right? So that's the thing with like any large event like that. It's not how it was financed, right? So it's definitely the energy thing. Will be its Achilles for a bit, but I think there's a huge amount of effort right now to fix that, and just even if it's costing people more money and it's the better thing to do, it's going to be that, and then the follow end behind that, spoiler alert, is going to be even if it's 100% energy renewable, it's going to be still like, why aren't we using that for other things? Why is it used for Bitcoin right now that we're producing all this renewable energy? So that's going to be probably the follow on to it once it's 100%. I think there's always going to be people that are going to be just looking at it, and because that number's big, they're going to have a concern with it, even if it's 100% renewable, right? It's just like, well, why is it using all the world's power, at some point, right? Like it's the 80 percentile of all power used or something. So, I think that's going to be a bit.
That's an excellent point. Bitcoin can't exist without energy usage, but terrorism can exist without Bitcoin. So they're not directly tied. We're running out of time. We're moving to predictions or story of the week. Dan, Eve, are you ready with a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
Some of you will get this. It's coming home. I think that England may actually win the Euros, and I will be watching it. And so fingers crossed, because England doesn't ever win anything. It's pretty lame.
That's what they're saying on the internet. The best part about the slogan, "It's coming home," is that they've never won before. Ben Ark, a similar soccer prediction from you?
Hopefully it doesn't, because I despise soccer and all spectator sports because, But what was I going to say? Yeah, the problem with the soccer, the Britain winning is it just kind of like reinforces the whole Brexit thing. Like we did well on the vaccine rollouts, and that's kind of pumped them, the Brexiteers, and so will the Bitcoin. Britain winning the football as well. So that'll be a sad day for us anti-Brexiters. But no, prediction story. So story of the week is there's a guy called Chris who's developed a Discord bot for it's like so say if you run a Discord server, you can connect. He's built an extension in LM-Bits, and you can connect that extension to your Discord server, and then people can have wallets and they can send value to each other just through like IRC backslashes, which is super cool. And then they've got wallets then which they can access, and on an LM-Bits server somewhere. So honestly, I've had a few like chats with people, like real life chats, phone calls, Zoom calls with some of the developers lurking around in the LM-Bits Telegram chat, and it's made me so flipping bullish that they're just really interesting, capable people developing interesting, cool things. And Chris is one of the people developing one of those things. So check it out this week. There should be some demos on World Crypto Network on how to set up this Discord bot. If you've got Discord's amazing as well. I don't know why I don't use it and why I'm still stuck on Telegram. It's so good. But yeah, check it out, and it'll show you how to, like, if you've got a Discord server and a community of people on there, then they can start sending value to each other. And we did also discuss, like, maybe if you had like a percentage fee. So as the administrator, it could be like a nice passive income in a way which isn't going to hurt people. Like, if I send Thomas 1,000 sats, maybe I'll get a sat just because I'm running that server. So it could be quite a nice way for people to stack some sats in a passive way. So yeah, just that. I haven't got a demo, but check it out this week. It should be coming out. It should be cool.
Very cool. Also, Michael from Bits Be Tripping, prediction or story of the week. Go ahead.
Yep. The story of the week so far, what I'm tracking right now is that kind of inner argument that's happening right now on the MEV side. I think it's going to be interesting now that we've got a really motivated Flashbot person in there trying to create some chaos there. I think it's a topic that actually transcends the mining. So when it goes to proof of stake, this is still going to be a thing. Validators writing scripts to try to arbitrage, front run each other. It's kind of just what the ecosystem that Ethereum's unfortunately built around it when it comes to front running and just the advantages in that space. So that's going to be a close watch. I'll be tweeting kind of the consumable version of that story, as it were, as a lot of technical conjecture is going back and forth. So yeah, it's going to be fun to see how that shakes out, because it's just a thing that's taking the story right now.
Very cool. And be sure to check out Michael's YouTube channel, Bits Be Tripping, one of the oldest, maybe the oldest Bitcoin mining channel and Ethereum mining channel and all that in existence. So very great channel. Thanks so much.
2013. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. In the age of mad Bitcoins. Indeed. And if you guys got some extra cash, check out shop.worldcryptonetwork.com. We've got some mugs and some t-shirts. I've got the Hal Finney mug right here myself. It's really cool. You can celebrate Hal Finney with a Hal Finney mug and help support the World Crypto Network at shop.worldcryptonetwork.com. We're running out of time. It was a long episode today. Thanks to everybody who stuck with us till the end. Be sure to give us a thumbs up. Put some comments in. We had some great comments last week. We kind of had a left versus right, socialism versus capitalism argument, and it exploded outwards into the comments. So I hope you guys will do the same this week. Find something that interests you and try to have a discussion about it in the comments right here on the World Crypto Network. That'd be fun. So thanks so much for joining us. Until next time, bye-bye.